Well, hi everybody. Welcome to GW CIM and Dr. Hogan's minicast series. Today we're going to talk about quality and sourcing of food, something that's very close to my heart. Our guests today are Dr. Leigh Frame, Director of GW Integrative Medicine Program. Dr. Frame has PhD in nutrition science, and with her careful guidance, GW University recently started master's program in nutrition. She's passionate about science of nutrition, and as you see, talking about it to everyone who will listen, and including us today. And also Lakshmi from School of Life and Shanti Yoga. Lakshmi has been teaching yoga since early 90s and helps to manage the ashram and the CSA. She's involved in all operations of CSA, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. And the way we got to know each other, of course, with Dr. Frame I work, but with Lakshmi, she was teaching HypnoBirthing for a long time, and actually our second kid, Seva, was born after we went and did the full HypnoBirthing with you guys. It was very exciting.
Yes.
And so with that, I'm going to jump right in because time is limited and we have tons of territory to cover. So this is, and for all of those listening, usually we have this very free-flowing, but here I had to prepare some questions because we have to stay on target. So I'm gonna start asking Dr. Frame first question. So why quality of food is so important?
So the quality of food is really, in my book and in many researchers, the number one indicator of whether a food is going to create health. And that's really, food is fuel, it's important, but it's really also a way to create health in your body. And if you're having a quality food product, that means it's going to be high in different nutrients, vitamins, minerals. It's going to be low in additives and processing things that can actually be detrimental to your health or actually dysregulate the way your body has a relationship with food. So it's really like, if I could only pick one thing about food, it would probably be quality, followed closely by diversity and variety. So if we could couple variety of quality foods, everything else should take care of itself.
Great. Lakshmi, do you want to add anything to this?
Yes, thanks. Because my work with the farms puts me in the perspective of the farming end of that. So health of people, as we just, we're talking about, and also health of the planet. Because when we think of quality of food, we usually think of what we're bringing in, but it's also the production of it, because how it's produced affects the health of the whole planet. And there's just for ourselves, we want not only to avoid illness, but we want vibrant health. Sometimes we think if I'm not sick, I'm healthy, but that's really not the case. There's so many different layers of health, and eating vibrant food helps us. And then the way that food is grown prevents the pollution that we're experiencing now. And in fact, this is really good timing because just a couple of days ago, we had a guest here. Here happens to be another one of our CSA members, who was giving a talk. It's his career to work with agriculture. And he said that agriculture is the biggest contributor to, what we're calling climate change, to climate pollution and the global changes that we're seeing. And I just want to just run through. He taught me something that day by putting it very succinctly. Methane gas from the cows is the big one that most people know about, that pollutes the atmosphere and contributes to the greenhouse gases. There's also, he said that all the rivers of the world are toxic at the mouth of the river, where the rivers meet the ocean. There is toxicity there. They're polluted. And that's from agriculture runoff around the world. So he talked about species.
Lakshmi, we'll come back to the sort of a soil in a bit, because I want to.
And then the soil, water scarcity, the soil and species. The thing is that the health of the planet is affected by the quality of food that's grown for us. Not only that what we eat, but how it's made.
Right.
That's the point.
Let's come back to that, because mentioned CSA, and I want to make sure. I'm guessing not all of our listeners know what CSA is, and there's also a little bit of noise, I think, coming from Lakshmi. I think it's coming from you. So I'm going to mute you for. Oh, perfect. Right,
okay.
That got fixed. So let's talk a little bit about what CSA is, because I think the concept is very important. It's a concept, as you said, not just quality of food, and you'll talk about specifics of particular CSA, but also a concept of fairness, and also concept of keeping food local and keeping the farmers sustainable. And I really want to emphasize that particular word because, there's a lot of major agriculture that's out there. As you mentioned, it may do just as much bad as good. So talk a little bit about the School of Life CSA has been there for a long time. We've been members for over 13 years and absolutely love it and do what we can to contribute to it too. But just walk us through what the CSA is, and particularly what is School of Life CSA.
Okay. Am I back on? The CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And what it really is a direct relationship between farmer and this consumer. And so it's a subscription. You don't purchase the food. You don't choose what you want. Basically, you sign up for a season, and that can be a summer, a year, or whatever seasons. Ours, we have 4 seasons that we work out: a whole year, a school year, a summer, fall, and a winter, spring. So people can sign up for any of those blocks. And the most important thing, though, is the relationship and the direct involvement with the farm. And even if the farm, sometimes farms, CSAs are on the farm, we don't happen to live close enough to a farm that can do that. So we pick up with a truck and bring it back. So we're sort of a consumer-driven CSA. And the farm we get food from also has another 150 people picking up on site. So they're hybrid, they're doing both. But the important thing is that people make a commitment, and the intention is so that it's for economics, as was already mentioned. It's for freshness of the food, because you get it directly. You're eating the food within a day of when it was picked most of the time, unless it's a storage crop. And it's a commitment so that the farmer doesn't have to worry about selling their product. They don't have to worry about the supply demand price. They set the price according to what it costs them to do the work. And the people agree to that and say, this is what I want, and I will eat whatever you provide for me for this year. So it's really a beautiful symbiotic relationship. That's the intention of it.
Can I add something to it? Because I find it really important. I've always asked, but you get this box of food and you got to know what to do with it. Guess what? That's how the life should be. You have to know how to cook the foods in season, right? And Leigh, like, you always advocate wait in season. Like, what's the better way to do so? And yeah, it may be a little inconvenient, but hey, that's the whole point. Learn how to make the best food in the moment. No, am I missing something?
That's exactly it. And and the other thing is, our bodies are designed. This is what we know from our yoga teachings. Our bodies are designed to, I should say, they have a relationship with the earth in the area that they live. Basically, everywhere in the world where people live, the food is there that's locally grown, that grows well in that area, serves the people in that area. Mm-hmm. That's part of the nature's design. And it's fascinating to think that, but you look around in the world and you'll see that at various cultures. And so eating locally is not only good for the planet in terms of the, transportation and all of that, and the local economy, but it's also good for our own health to eat what's grown locally.
Great.
If we eat tomatoes in the winter and, citrus in the summer or whatever, our bodies have to what's going on here? That's not what I want.
Right. So with that, let's switch to a little bit different topic, and sort of that's a quality of the food deterioration over time and the seasonal eating. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Frame. Leigh, this comes up all the time. If you're not CSA member and you're shopping at your favorite store, you can get access to pretty much food that's completely out of season. You can get access to that food 24/7, 365, pretty much. Some of it frozen, some of it fresh. So walk us through kind of what you think is the best principles, but more importantly, that whole point of deterioration of the quality of food over time. And a lot of people don't even think about this. They're just buying what's there without giving any thought to, wait a second, is this the product I should be getting, or should I really think twice, and then should I go to a completely different menu because the time of the year is such and such?
Right, absolutely. And I think there's a bit of a misconception out there that fresh is always best. And that's true if you are going to a bush and you are picking it and you are eating it. You are going out to your garden and you're eating it within a couple of days. Fresh is definitely best.
Or you're a CSA member.
Or you're a CSA, right? You're getting it right away. But when you think about our food system more broadly, what happens for most of the food out there in the grocery stores is it's picked. And then it may be refrigerated. put in a trucked across the country, then it may be put in the grocery store. It might sit there for a week. It could sit there for quite a long time. And throughout every step of that, every single day, it's actually losing its nutrition. It's losing some of the quality of the product. So in that sense, fresh is not always best, right? You could get, an example might be corn on the cob, right? If it's in season, it might be actually pretty fresh at your grocery store and very nutritious. But it could have been sitting there for a week or two. It's hard to know. Whereas when it's frozen, what happens is it's picked from the field and it's frozen right away. So in that case, frozen may actually be a better option than fresh because you're not getting the food that's sitting around. And so really it's about knowing the source of your food and where it comes from, and it's important for a lot of reasons. And obviously, I would love everyone to have a CSA, but that's not always accessible to everyone. They may not have one where they live. And so what do you do with the food that you have is just being very mindful about how long it's been there, how long it's been sitting out. Is there an option that you could have that maybe has been preserved way that's fresher and healthier? And frozen would be my ideal for that. Typically has almost no additives.
How do you figure that out? So let's say that somebody walks into the store, right? And then they go to, and let's not pick like Whole Foods or Trader Joe. I mean,
okay.
let's pick like Giant. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, everybody gets it. I'm not trying to pick on Giant. It's just I have one right here. So, but so you walk into the store, and how do you sort of decide? How do you figure it out? Okay, that frozen food is good, and this one not so much.
Well, I would start by looking at the fresh produce. So where is the fresh produce coming from? So when a food is in season, you can often actually get produce from a local area in your grocery store for many things. Like it might say local tomatoes, and a lot of times now they'll even tell you where they're coming from. So you could say, all right, that came from like 10 miles away. That's probably relatively fresh and it shouldn't have been sitting here too long. But if it's being shipped in from Mexico or someplace pretty far away, then you know that it's had at least some transit time. And so for that, maybe a frozen option would be better. Then when you're in the frozen aisle, then you really need to look at what's in the package. It should really have one ingredient, whatever the food is that you're buying, right? Like corn or peas or carrots. It shouldn't have other ingredients. Now you could buy ones that are pre-flavored and pre-sauced, and sometimes they can be a nice, healthy, quick option when you don't have time to do it yourself. But you have to be really careful there because that's when they start adding things that maybe you don't want to have in your diet or you don't want to have a lot of, like salt, fat, sugar, things like those. So the best would be to have them without the additives, but if you want a quick meal, and sometimes they have quick sort of prepackaged meals and that have actually very limited additives. So as long as you're making sure you're not getting a ton of salt, sugar, or fat in those, then they can be a really good option, especially with only occasionally.
Canned foods, that always comes up in my mind. I mean, that's probably that would be the last on the list of okay foods, but still, say a couple of words about that.
Yeah, when I think about canned, I would say it's better to have a canned vegetable than no vegetable at all, which sometimes is a real choice, right? People who live in food deserts, they go to the corner store, canned food, vegetables are their only option. And I say, fine, buy those, get something. One, you can get lower sodium options sometimes. Two, you can rinse them. Ideally, you would combine those two, buy the lower sodium item and then rinse it.
Take the food out of the can, you rinse it through, that washes off all the sodium, washes off if there are any preservatives. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and they've actually done research study that shows it significantly reduces the sodium by rinsing them. So that was when I, being a way overscheduled, crazy busy person, decided that canned beans were fine because I could buy the low sodium, I can rinse them, and it's so much more convenient for me. And not having to plan ahead. Now, if you can make a big batch of dried beans, it's going to be way more affordable, probably healthier for you, but we live in the real world and sometimes we have to have options. So I'm not against canned, but you do want to be careful, ideally getting a product that doesn't have any BPA in the lining, all of these things that, so where you're getting your canned food matters.
One thing about that, there seemed to be a quick increase in a different canned food stored in a glass. So I just want to mention that would be ideal. We buy a lot of sardines and sprouts. Sprouts are like a European version of sardines. I mean, we Russians grew up on this stuff. So we've been very happy because they switched from cans to the glass containers. So we've been buying those.
Yeah, which is how you would can them if you were canning at home, right?
Right. So great. Well, so let's switch to sort of the favoritely and mostly confused topic, which is the conventional versus organic versus all other sources. But before we go there, the School of Life CSA is very unique. It's something that probably a lot of people are not familiar. It's something called Biodynamic, which I actually consider kind of level up from organic altogether. So Lakshmi, walk us through why does your organization chose to pick Biodynamic? Maybe say a few words also about our farmer who's in Pennsylvania. So, and also what is Biodynamic? Like, what's the roots of it, and why it's so important?
Good question. And it's hard to be brief with that, but I'll do my best. I mean, and just stick with a couple things, which is biodynamic is, like you said, it's a step up from organic. And the basic reason there is because organic eliminates toxicity. That's one shallow way to look at it. It adds some things as well, but biodynamic is really about adding things so that you don't need the pesticides, you don't need the fertilizers, you don't need the herbicides. So it's really about healing the soil and healing the atmosphere around that. That's the major difference. So it's very soil focused. So that's the second thing I want to mention, which is that Rudolf Steiner, we got involved in this because we were a yoga center, and our teacher, our guide, our founder wanted to find the best quality food because we know the value of that, not only for our physical health, but our mental and our spiritual health as well. And we discovered biodynamics. And one of the things that Dr. Steiner said about this, and the very interesting thing is that he said this in 1924, it's like 100 years ago now, almost. He said that then the soil was depleted and could not provide the forces of life that were needed for us to develop ourselves fully back then. Imagine what he would be saying now, what's happened in the last 98 years.
Didn't he put some crazy predictions like that at certain year amount of bee population will crash and it'll...
They were crazy then, and it happened.
Lee, if you have never read anything about them, this guy, I don't think he was saying anything from himself. Like, he was downloading stuff from the web in
clairvoyant is the word that's
yeah. I mean, he predicted the all kinds of problems.
He predicted we'd be drinking water out of bottles, and everybody laughed at him.
I would have laughed at him too.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was a genius, and I'm actually, Lakshmi, you guys kind of pushed me towards learning about him because when I first learned about concept of biodynamic, and then we had a tour, right, to see our farmer and sort of actually saw it in life how it's done. This is a decade ago.
Yeah, we have a tour every year. Yeah,
and so I think after that I kind of learned a lot of other things that he was doing. He's also a founder of anthroposophical medicine. So he founded a beekeeping arm. He found biodynamic farming. He founded a new system of education. That's what's called
Waldorf schools.
Waldorf schools. He's a founder of that, and then he founded, and then so like there are people.
And also care communities which deal with developmental disabilities, like Down syndrome people that live in conjunction and share life sharing. Our farm is one of our farms is part of that. Is one of those communities.
So we
have. But the real thing about
several
biodynamics is this. Sorry.
We have several farmers, but I think most of food comes from one farm in Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Right. For the CSA, there's one farm. It's a biodynamic and it's a CSA, and that's always been our case. We've always used had those two components, and that brings in about 80% of our produce. Mm-hmm. And then we get the other produce. Our goal is to try to bring in order to support the sustainability issue, other biodynamic farms, even if they're not as local or as close, because there aren't that many. Especially if you're looking for fruit or unusual things, you may have to go the distance. But we thought that was worthwhile because of the biodynamic component for us to eat it and for the farmer to be supported in their work of healing the soil, like I mentioned. And then we bring in some other organic things just to fill in, because not no one farm can produce, they can't always provide a variety of, because soil or the conditions that they had a bad year. Everyone has a bad year in something once in a while. And so we diversify a little bit in that we call them supplements. Mm-hmm. And we bring in eggs and some other non-produce, non-fresh food things from Amish farmers that are, en route to us to where our biodynamic farm is. And that's really nice because it gives people a more, like a basket of food, that they can, it's not just, too much of one thing. So that's a little bit of a co-op model that we have put into it, and some other CSAs have done that too. But our main focus is biodynamics. That's the number one focus of our CSA. And the reason, as I was starting to talk to about is really about healing the planet. And it's about bringing in the forces of life that human beings need to fully manifest in our own personal evolutions.
And
personal and planetary evolution.
And Lakshmi put me in touch with John, who I interviewed some weeks ago. He's one of our farmers. He's like 90 plus, takes tons of supplements. He's like working 10 hours a day in the field, and he looks like he's this classic guy from Blue Zone. So thank you, Lakshmi, for that.
Yeah.
So I think
so there's a blue zone in Pennsylvania, is what you're telling me?
No. So he is not in Pennsylvania. He's in Florida.
Oh,
actually,
okay.
I hope he did okay with the hurricane. I don't know.
He did. He told me they did fine. Yes.
God. So our time is getting close, but I want us to touch upon one last topic, which is conventional versus organic. And Leigh, walk us through sort of. There's this important principle of dirty dozen, clean 15, and maybe mention that briefly. But what should our listeners buy when they go to the store, especially when particular quality is critical to be organic?
Yeah. So, like with canned food, any vegetable is better than no vegetable. If you cannot afford the organic vegetables, then buy any vegetable. And that's where the dirty dozen and clean 15 really come in to help you figure out what should you prioritize. So the dirty dozen are put out the environmental working group, a list every year of the plants that have been shown to have the most pesticides used on them. So if you can only afford to buy 12 of your produce items organic, those are the ones you want to get organic. Flip side, the clean 15 are the ones that have the least amount of produce. So those are the ones that you can get away with getting conventional. In terms of the quality of the food, because organic, like you're saying, is really more about taking something away, the nutrient difference between the two is actually not huge. Where you're really going to see the difference is in things like phytochemicals. So for instance, garlic has a compound called allicin, which is basically a pesticide. And so if you're putting a pesticide on the outside of the plant, it no longer needs to make its own pesticide. And so organic garlic has a lot more allicin in it. And that's a health promoting compound. So there are some health benefits to the organic beyond the pesticides, but they're still using a lot of the similar principles, and the soil may be very depleted. And one of the things very close to my heart is the soil microbiome might not be there, or the mycobiome might not be there, the fungal interface. So it may not be that much of an improvement over conventional in terms of nutrition. Now, if you have the biodynamic option, that would be totally the way to go, because they are actually feeding the soil and bringing the ecosystem back into balance, the way the plant was really designed to fully function. So that would be the ideal. The other thing is another really good rule is if you can wash something easily, you can often get away with getting conventional. And that's the opposite is true too. So if you can't wash it, then you really need to buy organic. And tea is one of my favorite examples of that. A lot of people do not buy organic tea. Those leaves are harvested and put into a bag. They are never washed. So if you aren't buying organic, you are getting a lot of pesticide exposure from that. So if there's only one thing I would add to the dirty dozen, which is not usually on there because it's not produce, would be tea, coffee, any of those drinks that you are not washing before you are consuming them. Really important to get organic. But it's really about making it work for you and your budget and your family.
Well, perfect. So we're unfortunately out of time, so we're going to wrap up here. But first, starting with Lakshmi. Lakshmi, how do people get in touch with the School of Life CSA? And I'll, of course, put links in the description of the program.
Okay. Well, our overarching organization is the School of Life, and it's schooloflife.org. And there's a CSA link there, and that's the rest of our CSA website is me
Great. And Dr. Frame, if you liked her presentation today, I mean, me too, but mostly she and Janet do a lot of the GW podcasts, so I'll make sure I'll put the link there. Any closing thoughts from either of you?
I actually would like to go focus on the soil. We talked about that before the podcast, and it's a couple of things. And the main thing is for our health, we wrote a booklet, Victor wrote a booklet about this, and he talked about Steiner insisting on the soil being the main component. And then Dr. Max Gerson actually cured cancer way back at the beginning, 30s and 40s, by making soil the most important part of his cancer treatment, which was basically using organic food, because he said that's what is over time denatured soil without the proper microbiome that was just mentioned, as well as the fertilizer, the chemicals on top of it, is going to over time really deteriorate our whole population. And that's exactly just like Steiner predicted the bees and the water bottles. Dr. Gerson predicted what we're seeing today.
Thank you. And Dr. Frame?
Yeah, I have one last thought. It comes from one of my favorite cultures, Native Americans. They like to think of food as either alive or dead. And produce is obviously alive, right? It's something we grew and it's health promoting. Food that is alive helps you live. And food that is dead actually can cause disease. And we have a lot of food that is dead in our world. It comes in packages, it's highly processed. A lot of the health promoting aspects have been removed from it, or were never there to start with. So I really want to put a plea out to try and pick live food, pick food that will contribute to your health. Not that you can't ever have a treat. I'm not going to say never eat a processed food, but that's really should be a treat, which means occasional, and really focus your diet on the healthiest, most alive foods that you can get for your family.
Great. Well, thank you both so much.
Amen to that.
And this is GW and Dr. Hogan podcast, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.